Hey there, ninth graders. JC here, making a review video of the activity that you did on yesterday where we looked at working conditions, really changes in the workplace that would come about during the Second Industrial Revolution, which is this time period that we're talking about, even though we're referring it to as the Gilded Age. The Second Industrial Revolution is going on during this time period, and one of the biggest revolutions is going to be the factory system, which is where you're going to see a lot of these conditions take place. Now, our focus for this third topic, because we talked about immigration, we talked about inequality, now really what we're talking about is business practices, and business practices that come from very, very, very wealthy men. The wealthiest men in our history, especially John D. Rockefeller, is the wealthiest man. I don't know if anyone will ever touch him again because the laws put in place that were not in place back then that allowed him to do some things that are illegal now. Right? So one of their business practices was putting their workers through horrible working conditions. So we are going to look at some of these working conditions that took place back then. And I had you analyze some images and some letters and things like that. And I'm going to go through the answers with you, so you're going to want to probably take a minute and pull that up from yesterday so you can fill this in. Because again, it's all going to come back again. All right, so let's look at this. Let's see if my screen will... All right. So the first thing I had you look at, which was probably the easiest working condition to look at, was these three images. I had you identify each of them, right? So upper left-hand corner, that is a 7-year-old paper boy. The one on the right is 9-year-old children working on dangerous equipment in a factory. What do you notice stands out? Probably more than anything, number one, they're standing on the piece of equipment, but number two, the one boy is not even wearing shoes. And then down in the left-hand corner, you have a 6-year-old working in a shrimp and oyster industry, shucking shrimps and oysters. So what is this illustrating? What working condition? Child labor is what we are looking for here. Okay, so child labor was a major issue back then. Today we have child labor laws that prevent this from happening. But imagine, let's do an age. Let's put this in perspective. So 6 years old, my son is 6 years old. He is in first grade. A 7-year-old is going to be in second grade. These are boys that have jobs, 20 to 40 hours a week they are working. The 9-year-olds, they're working probably a 40-hour work week in this factory, right? So a 9-year-old, you're looking at maybe third or fourth grade, right? Can you imagine a third or fourth grader working at Ward's Manufacturing right down the road when it was open? It's hard to wrap our heads around, but this was common because, number one, school was not mandatory back then. Your parents didn't get arrested if you didn't go to jail. And number two, they had to help their parents pay the bills because wages were so low, as we saw already. The second document was a little bit blurry, which I hope that you figured out. You had to be in present mode to view this, but this was essentially a report that was written about a gentleman that went in to investigate a factory. And I had you read through it and answer a couple of questions. And overall, what this highlighted was two things. Again, child labor, and two, dangers at the workplace. I'm going to show you a couple points that you really probably should have looked at to figure this out. Right? So dangers at the workplace. I wish I did not have all the children around because they are getting in the way of the trucker and getting hurt. But the parents bring children with them and make them work because they don't understand that it is not good for them. These children never go to school instead of running around and worrying all of the other workers. It is better that they work and earn a few pennies to help their parents out. I can't keep them out of the factory anyway. They help to get oysters out of the way. The second one, child labor laws. I asked about child labor law. He said the shucking shed is not a factory, and therefore it's outside the law. Besides that, we don't employ the children. They work with and for their parents. So there was one child labor law that existed during this time period that was passed a couple of decades before the Gilded Age, and that law said that if you were 9 to 14 years old, you could not work more than 40 hours a week, and if you were 15 to 18-year-old, you could not work over 65 hours a week. That was the only thing that existed. So if we look at the chart here and these ages, this documented the number of children that were reported working at this location. You had a total of 26 children between the ages of 17 and 14, or 7 and 14 working. Right? You had one 7-year-old female, one 8-year-old male, two 9-year-old males, and you can go down and read through. So quite a few children. And a way that a lot of parents got around this was simply by the employer saying, well, they don't work for me, they're just helping you do your job, right? I did not employ them, and they essentially pay them under the table. They're not actual on their rolls, they're payrolls. So that's a way they got around this child labor law, and they were able to employ them. So that's an example of two things into one. The next thing that I had you look at was this picture and tell me what this is. What did this illustrate? What is it depicting? And what is depicting is women at a sweatshop. And normally if you're in class, I would say, what things stand out to you in this picture, right? And you'd say, well, how close the women are working together, what a mess it is, the gentleman standing over top of them, hovering, making sure they're not taking a break, what they're wearing. Certainly looks, hopefully that's not a summer day. That would certainly be quite warm for them. Now, what is a sweatshop? A sweatshop is actually one of your terms that's on your vocab sheet. This is a manufacturing workshop where workers toil long hours under poor working conditions and for low pay. These are illegal in the United States. These are places that have very, very low pay, $3, $4 an hour. People are working 60 to 80 hours a week. They are illegal in the U.S. Whether or not they really happen is up for debate. But they are legal in other parts of the world, and there are known companies that have been accused of having sweatshops around the world, such as Nike is a big one that's been accused of that. So you may be able to find several other very popular American companies that use sweatshops to produce a lot of their goods. But these were very common. These weren't illegal back then, so they were a common thing. Now, what issue is this depicting? We already talked about a dangerous working condition. This would be a harsh working condition. So what is the difference? The difference is, obviously, danger puts your life in danger, right? That's the main theme behind it. Harsh is low pay. You're not making much. You're working ridiculously long hours. You probably don't have heat in the winter. You don't have AC in the summer. You don't get breaks. That's what these gentlemen are there for, to make sure these women don't take breaks, including a lunch break. There's no law saying there has to be a built-in lunch break for them. So that's what these, now they would probably claim they're there to make sure the women don't steal anything, but let's be honest, nobody's stealing something in this place. So those are some conditions that we're looking at. Sweatshops were very, very popular back then. And one of the most popular was at the Triangle Waste Factory, where they made clothing. And this last thing that I illustrated to you is one of the most famous events because it was the first time that people started to change things and really open their eyes to maybe we have some issues in the workplace that need to be addressed. Right? So the Triangle Factory occurred in 1911, so this is right at the tail end of the Gilded Age. Near closing time on Saturday afternoon, March 1911, a fire broke out on the top floors of the Ash Building in the Triangle Waste Company. Within several minutes, quiet spring afternoon erupted into madness, a terrifying moment in time disrupting forever the lives of young workers. By the time the fire was over, 146 of the 500 employees had died. They witnessed the victims and their families, the people passing by, witnessed desperate leaps from the 9th floor windows, and the city of New York could never be the same. The Triangle Factory illustrated that fire inspections and precautions were woefully inadequate. Workers recounted their helpless efforts to open the doors, which many believed that they were locked, and the owners had frequently locked the doors in the past, claiming that workers stole materials. The 9th floor fire escape led to nowhere, certainly not to safety, and it bent as workers went to climb down it. If you remember, if you can think of the cities, and they have those ladders that, not ladders, but stairways that go down the side of the buildings, zigzag, that's what they're talking about. A couple people step on it, it broke and collapsed all the way, and that was no way out. So they have no way out other than windows. The firefighters' ladders are way too short, so they end up having to jump or burn alive was the options they had. This is an image from that day. A lot of people compare this to 9/11, obviously much different in the number of casualties and what went down, but as far as that image that people remember in their mind of people leaping from the Twin Towers rather than essentially getting crushed by the building or the fire that existed in the building, there's those images that are especially embedded in my brain because I remember there's tons of videos showing people jumping to their death. Same thing here. This was embedded in people's mind. They're walking by as this is happening. People are jumping to their death so they don't burn alive. So this is going to obviously illustrate dangerous working conditions. So the 3 working conditions that were prevalent were dangerous working conditions, harsh working conditions, and child labor. These are ways that big businessmen made a lot of money by putting their workers through horrific conditions. And this is going to kind of kick us off. Now you're going to look at the actual business practices that these businessmen took part in to make hundreds of millions, billions, and close to trillions of dollars today.